Iran is one of the rare countries that has managed to become the largest in the Middle East and one of the strongest and most fragile economies in the world. On the one hand, a large population, a surprisingly good level of education, a region connecting continents, and seemingly unlimited reserves of everything that comes to mind when you think of energy. On the other hand, it has been living with a reality that has been incomprehensible to outsiders for years. Despite its underground resources, this country cannot run its economy like a normal country. And this is not just a story of bad management. It is a story of being kept out of the global system and locked into misguided policies at home, all at the same time. Moreover, this tension is reaching its peak again these days. In February 2026, Tehran's statements warned that a possible U.S. attack could escalate into a regional war, while Washington is also signaling that it is increasing its military presence in the region. So, while the issue may appear to be about the economy, it is actually an extension of geopolitics. But this video is not meant to repeat the daily headlines, because headlines come and go. Problems in this region never end. Iran's problem, however, is chronic. It is a country with the world's greatest opportunities, yet unable to capitalize on them. So what is Iran's economic impasse? Can this country return to the global economy? And internally, what invisible problems are gnawing away at the economy? Or is it severe sanctions? Let's talk about the elephant in the room first. Iran is one of the world's largest oil and natural gas powers. Data from the U.S. Energy Information Administration, EIA, indicates that Iran has the world's third largest oil reserves and second largest natural gas reserves. Normally, a country becomes a superpower if it possesses both of these directly or indirectly. There are two ways to achieve this. The first is the power to enrich itself by exporting, and the second is the power to establish industry domestically with cheap energy. In Iran, however, a third power is emerging: vulnerability. Because if energy is not managed properly, instead of generating wealth, it makes the country dependent on one thing: price fluctuations, supply shocks, sanctions, insurance, transportation, financing. And Iran's problem is not producing oil. It is being able to sell it through normal channels. Being able to use its money directly. To understand Iran's economy, balance sheets are not enough. Because there is an invisible factor here: sanctions. These sanctions do not just mean selling. They also mean access to the banking and financial system, transportation and insurance, spare parts, and technology, and most importantly, fear. As you know, markets don't like fear, because for global companies, trade with Iran is often not a profit opportunity, but a risk to reputation and access. One of the most recent examples of this risk is the financial messaging network SWIFT. In the past, steps were taken such as removing banks under sanctions in Iran from the system following EU decisions. This may not officially ban a country from trade, but in practice it takes it off the highway of global finance and onto a dirt road. And on a dirt road, there are no speed limits. But the risk of accidents is high. Iran's location on the map is like a businessman's dream. A long coastline, critical straits, the Asia-Europe crossing, standing next to the world's oil heart, the Strait of Hormuz. This location normally elevates a country to an energy and logistics empire, placing the key to the world in its hands. But Iran faces a paradox here too. Geography can be the gateway, but passing through that gateway requires the keys to the global system: trust, finance, insurance, transparency, stability. At the current juncture, As tensions rise in the region, this geographical advantage is rapidly transforming from an asset into a liability. Because investors are seeking a country that can guarantee stability in three areas: prices, routes, and security. This may not officially ban a country from trade, but in practice it takes it off the highway of global money and onto a dirt road. And on a dirt road, there are no speed limits. But the risk of accidents is high. Iran's location on the map is like a businessman's dream. A long coastline, critical straits, the Asia-Europe crossing, standing next to the world's oil heart, the Strait of Hormuz. This location normally elevates a country to an energy and logistics empire, placing the key to the world in its hands. But Iran faces a paradox here too. Geography can be the gateway, but passing through that gateway requires the keys to the global system: trust, finance, insurance, transparency, stability. At the current juncture, as tensions rise in the region, this geographical advantage is rapidly transforming from an asset into a liability. Investors are seeking a country that can guarantee stability in three areas: prices, routes, and security. It's easy to attribute Iran's economic problems solely to external factors, but that's incomplete. Domestically, the system itself produces incentives that sabotage it. Energy subsidies are at the heart of this. The state sells fuel and energy cheaply to the public to ease their burden. At first glance, this seems like social policy. But in practice, what happens is this: as energy becomes cheaper, efficiency becomes unnecessary. As efficiency becomes unnecessary, consumption increases. As consumption increases, infrastructure cannot cope. As infrastructure cannot cope, outages increase. As outages increase, the economy comes to a standstill. As the economy slows down, the state tries to put out the fire with more subsidies. And so the vicious cycle continues. In recent years, analyses of Iran's energy supply, demand imbalance, and outages have frequently highlighted structural problems such as an aging power plant fleet, lack of investment, and grid losses. When you add the equipment/economic constraints imposed by sanctions to this picture, Iran's energy abundance ceases to be an abundance and turns into a machine of inefficiency. One of the painful aspects of sanctions is this: when the official economy shrinks, the informal economy prospers. Oil is paid for with shadow fleets. Imports are made through intermediary networks. Money transfers are made through third countries, and different exchange rate regimes are used. And here, an interesting psychology emerges. The more repressive the system is, the more professional those who circumvent it become. The U.S. Treasury Department's Office of Foreign Assets Control, OFAC, publishes guidelines for shipping and transportation partners on plans to circumvent Iranian oil sanctions, demonstrating how systematic the issue of circumvention has become. The U.S. Treasury also announced that by the end of 2025, it would target many ships and actors with new sanction shocks against Iran's oil transportation network. The result of such steps is this: Iran's sales are not completely restricted, but they are selling cheaper, riskier, and with lower margins. So, it has revenue from energy sales. But that revenue is not clean and sustainable enough to transform the country. The most painful thing in this story is that the status quo is not bad for many powerful actors. Iran's rivals benefit from Iran remaining constrained. When supply tightens in the oil market, other exporters gain easier dominance. Some buyers access cheaper energy through shadow channels. For example, China emerges as the most critical buyer in Iran's energy exports, but much of this relationship operates through the gray and secretive areas created by sanctions. On the other hand, it makes Iran a strategic partner. Meanwhile, Iran is a member of OPEC. In theory, the solidarity of the oil cartel appears to be a powerful lever. In practice, however, the interests of its members often diverge. Therefore, Iran's problem is not one of having oil. It is one of lacking the political ground and power to normalize oil sales in the global system. Now let's get to the part that doesn't make headlines, but is really eating away at the economy. High inflation expectations, capital and investor flight, brain drain, declining fertility, and an aging population. These kinds of dynamics quietly destroy an economy, because the fuel for investment isn't money, it's a sense of the future. When that sense of the future is lost, the best educated people leave. Those who remain switch from saving to protection mode, and markets become stuck in the short term. And this is where Iran's tragedy lies. It produces an educated population, but it cannot expand the playing field that would keep that population's productivity within the country. And that population is fleeing. There is no miracle for Iran. But there are two realistic roadmaps, both difficult. Road A: gradual normalization plus transparency, reducing tension on the nuclear file, a more predictable framework for finance and trade, the return of investment, and investors with the gradual easing of sanctions. This is the most economically logical path, but the political cost is high. Many promises will have to be made at the table. Path B: institutionalizing the shadow economy. That is, building a system, despite sanctions, alternative payment networks, third country trade, deeper China/Russia integration. This path may provide short-term relief, but in the long run, it carries the risk of locking the country into the second tier in terms of technology, productivity, and capital. Iran's dilemma is this: it needs to normalize in order to fix its economy. But to normalize, it needs to rewrite certain power balances. Will this be an uprising or a political defeat? And right here, the rising U.S.-Iran tension these days casts a shadow over the economy once again. As uncertainty increases, foreign investment does not come. The will for reform weakens internally. The shadow economy grows stronger. The system becomes even more locked up. Iran's story can actually be summed up in one sentence: having the best cards in the world, but not being able to play the game. It has energy, geography, human capital. But the fundamental thing that drives a normal economy is missing: sustainable integration. If you want to talk more about how money, power, and states stay afloat or stumble using economic tools in this channel, don't forget to subscribe. And perhaps the most critical question is this: if Iran's potential ever truly transforms into an effective economy, it will affect not only the Iranian people, but the entire region and the world. Because everything from energy prices to trade corridors, from waves of migration to security balances, will be reshaped. Today, it is easy to view Iran as a problematic country. However, a more accurate interpretation may be to see it as a giant actor standing on the very edge of the global system, experiencing more friction the more it tries to enter. That is why the U.S.-Iran tension is not just a political headline. It creates an economic wave that extends to oil prices, insurance costs, supply chain routes, and even the pace of the world's energy transition. So, Iran's economic dilemma is actually the world's dilemma. While trying to reduce energy dependence, the cost of keeping a critical player outside a system that still relies on energy is increasing. Let's see how much longer they can keep this player out.